Welcome back to CNN Philippines First. Suspected sugar hoarding, now a possible sugar smuggling. The Customs Bureau on Thursday intercepted at the Subic port a cargo vessel from Thailand with more than 7,000 metric tons of refined sugar. That's about 140,000 bags, which the Office of the Press Secretary says had a total tax payment of 45.6 million pesos. Customs officials say the crew presented recycled import documents. They vow to investigate those behind this importation cycle and file charges if necessary. The suspected contraband follows a raid of warehouses in Pampanga and Bulacan. The operation yielded thousands of Thai sugar sacks believed to have been hoarded by importers. Officials say the sugar stock is worth around 220 million pesos. The government is giving owners 2 weeks to prove they have legal documents. Otherwise, they may face hoarding and smuggling charges. Some welcome news for consumers. Expect a price drop in sugar next week. The Office of the Press Secretary says owners of the biggest supermarkets have agreed to lower the suggested retail price, or SRP, from 90 to 110 pesos per kilogram to 70 pesos per kilogram. Carrie Cator tells us how the private sector is trying to help farmers in other ways.
The private sector is not sitting back as the country feels the pinch of low sugar supply. Go Negosyo founder and former presidential advisor Joey Concepcion says efforts are underway to strengthen the agriculture sector.
Pinag-aaral pa namin yung agriculture kasi talaga sa contract growing, contract farming ay mahirap. Dapat balansehin natin yung interest ng farmers.
Concepcion says the Private Sector Advisory Council will present its plans to the President as soon as it is ready. The council hopes to tap more industry leaders to champion agriculture products, including sugar.
Bawat agriculture crop, pipili kami ng isang lead, tutulong rin sa amin para gumawa ng framework.
Concepcion is supporting the plan of President Bongbong Marcos to import up to 150,000 metric tons of sugar to protect both farmers and consumers. While Trade Secretary Alfredo Pascual is vowing to explore more options with supermarkets lowering the retail prices. The business expert believes more conscious efforts should be given to the agriculture sector. But he sees no need for a full-time secretary in reaction to the call from Senator Risa Ontiveros.
I think the President is getting there. He just wants to make sure na kasi mahirap yung agriculture.
Carrie Cator, CNN Philippines.
As classes begin next week, shoppers are rushing to buy school supplies in malls, bookstores, and Manila's bargain haven, Divisoria. The Trade Department visited stores to make sure there is no overpricing. Paige Javier reports.
Julianne Bravo spent her Friday morning buying school supplies for her son, an incoming grade 4 student. She admits she's on a tight budget.
Iba pong price po niya, medyo mataas, ma'am. Kumpara po sa mga dati pong price. Kung lang po muna, ma'am. Binabudget ko lang po yung namin ngayon, ma'am.
Julianne and another shopper shared why they prefer to buy in this establishment.
Dito na rin po ako nagbili po, simula pa rin po ng elementary hanggang high school po. Nasa magtapos po ako ng pag-aaral.
Mas maganda po kasi dito kasi hindi siya crowded, unlike sa Divisoria. Mapamura ka pero siksikan naman.
This Caloocan bookstore is one of 2 places inspected by authorities Friday to check their compliance with the latest suggested retail prices. Trade officials found products like notebooks, ball pens, and pencils lower or within the SRP. But at one popular bookstore, one item was overpriced.
Mostly compliant naman po sila dun sa gabay natin, our guide for school supplies. Although meron tayo ding LOI na isa dahil yung writing pad po for grade 1, yung 80 leaves, mas mataas ng 2 pesos.
Even before getting the letter of inquiry, the area manager says they will adjust the shelf tag to reflect the correct price.
Kung hindi nila pinalitan yung price, meron naman tayo under the Price Act ng mga provisions. Of course, we can always look at the provisions on illegal price manipulation.
In Divisoria, the volume of shoppers has picked up compared to last week. Vendors say most of their prices are the same, except for notebooks, which are low in supply. Notebooks now range from 17 to 20 pesos compared to 15 pesos last week. Despite the crowds, many shoppers say they still prefer to visit Divisoria.
Mura mas mura. Dito na sila mamili kaso masikip na lang. Tsatsagaan nga lang.
Paige Javier, CNN Philippines.
Students set to begin their daily commute next week for in-person classes may have a harder time purchasing beep cards used to store money for trains, buses, and ferry fares. Our George Quiles tells us why.
The Transportation Department says there are now a limited number of stored value cards available for commuters. This is due to the supplier's failure to replenish the cards. Stored value or beep cards are reloadable, contactless smart cards used in paying rail transportation fares in Metro Manila. A beep card with 70 pesos preloaded credits is sold for 100 pesos.
Talagang nahirapan silang makapag-produce ng aming pangangailangan dahil diyan sa pandemic. Doon naman sa isang pinagkukuhanan sa Russia. Nanggagaling po doon yung isang component or isang gas na ginagamit sa pagpapabricate ng microchips. Yan pong microchips, yan ang inilalagay dun sa beep card. So ngayon, dahil dun sa giyera, naapektuhan din po yung supply nila.
With this, the agency is reminding existing users to take care of their cards, with more passengers expected to avail of beep cards ahead of the resumption of face-to-face classes next week. Despite the problem, the MRT3 management says they are already prepared for the opening of classes. Students may avail of the 20% discount on single journey tickets at designated booths at MRT stations.
Kami po ay nagbibigay ng assurance na hindi kakapusin itong single journey ticket as compared dito sa stored value. So ang talagang may problema lang ay yung stored value.
The MRT3 will also re-implement its passenger segregation policy starting Sunday. This means the first two doors of the first car are dedicated to senior citizens, persons with disability, pregnant, and passengers with children, while the last three doors of the first car are exclusively for female passengers. The rest are open for all. Meanwhile, over at the LRT Line 2, students may avail of the free ride starting Monday until November 5. They just need to present their school ID or their registration form and another ID at the passenger assistance booths to get their free ticket. George Quiles, CNN Philippines.
Other news, lawmakers from the United States visiting detained former Senator Laila De Lima. They secured court permission to see her today at the Philippine National Police Custodial Center in Camp Crame. The Muntinlupa Regional Tri-Court Branches 204 and 256 granted the extremely urgent motion filed by the congressional delegation led by Senator Edward Markey. They were barred from visiting De Lima yesterday because they did not have court permission to do so. U.S. senators have called on the Philippine government to release De Lima and to drop her remaining drug charges after some witnesses recanted their testimonies against her. Getting into China is like entering a fortress as it imposes some of the world's toughest lockdowns because of its aggressive zero COVID-19 policy. Tristan Nodalo, who is in Beijing for a 3-month study grant, takes us there.
After enduring 10 days in a centralized quarantine facility in Guangzhou province, south of China, and passing the daily RT-PCR test requirement for foreign travelers, we were finally given the go signal to enter Beijing. This is Guangzhou Baiyun International Airport. Travelers here only need to present a QR code showing that they have been cleared for travel by health authorities. China seeks to boost its local tourism despite the strict COVID-19 measures.
Dito medyo mas maluwag na yung mga tao, naka-mask na lang. Hindi sila naka-PPE, tapos yun, may mga nakikita na rin tayong mga local travelers.
From Guangzhou, it's a 3-hour journey to the capital. It's our second day in Beijing and it's business as usual in some major financial hubs in the city. Slowly, establishments are opening up, restaurants, banks, and shopping centers are rising back to life again. But before anyone can enter these areas, one must ensure that they are COVID-19 free. COVID testing is almost second nature. Testing booths are available in almost every street in the city. Everyone with a Beijing health code can walk in and get tested.
Papakita mo lang yung code, pagkatapos pipila ka na agad. At pagkatapos tuloy-tuloy na yung proseso na yun. So napakadali, convenient para sa kanila.
Despite the challenges brought by the dynamic COVID-19 policy and its long-term impact to the world's second largest economy, China maintains it is on the right track in terms of economic recovery. From Beijing, China, Tristan Odalo, CNN Philippines.
When we return, the NBA star Jordan Clarkson arriving in Manila tonight, while Kai Soto is already back in town, both gearing up for a FIBA qualifiers window. And Blackpink's comeback single finally arrives. You're watching CNN Philippines. Welcome back. American tech giant Apple has warned its users of a vital flaw in their operating system. According to the company, iPhones, iPads, and Mac computers all share a vulnerability that may be exploited by hackers. Apple has since fixed this fault and advised all users to update their software for protection. Moving on to sports, Filipino-American NBA star Jordan Clarkson is expected to arrive in the country tonight to train for his Gilas Pilipinas stint. In an interview with CNN Philippines Sports Desk, Samahang Basketball ng Pilipinas Executive Director Sonny Balio said the Utah Jazz player will begin practice tomorrow for the fourth window of the FIBA World Cup Asian qualifiers. On to another prized Pinoy cager, Kai Soto landed in Manila last night. The Australian Basketball League athlete wrote on his Instagram story, "I'm home." Kai will also compete under Gilas, which is set to face Lebanon on August 25th. In the PBA Philippine Cup Finals for the first time in over a decade, the TNT Tropang Giga and the San Miguel Beermen will clash for the league's most coveted title. Defending champion TNT is bannered by last season's finals MVP Mikey Williams, and the Beermen are determined to reclaim the crown after their historic 5-peat reign ended in 2020.
Honestly, very difficult, and this is just being as objective as possible. If you take a look at the lineup and how deep and how strong the other team is.
Kung kaya namin manalo ng 6 Philippine Cups, so pipilitin namin, but napakahirap Dahil alam naman natin na yung debt pipe namin kulang na eh. Pero we're trying our best na to be cohesive. And maraming bagong players, so they're still learning how to be a competitive team, especially in playing the championship.
Game 1 tips off on Sunday at the Araneta Coliseum in Quezon City, but TNT Tropang Giga will play 2 matches without head coach Shot Reyes. Veteran mentor has duties with Gilas Pilipinas with the FIBA qualifiers against Lebanon next week and versus Saudi Arabia on August 29th. These coincide with games 2 and 3 of the All-Filipino Conference set on the 24th and the 26th. But the SVP says it is a sacrifice they're willing to make.
There's a bigger calling at this point. No? It's flag and country. And I think we as an organization has always been ready to answer to that call. No? In the past, TNT players were answering to the call.
Reyes says this is an opportunity for the Tropang Giga to prove that they can play well without their head coach. And before we go, the long wait is over. Blackpink's newest single, Pink Venom, has arrived and is pulling out all the stops. Pink Venom is the lead single for their forthcoming album. Here's a sneak peek.
Bring the pain like this, that pink venom, this, that pink venom, this, that pink venom. Get 'em, get 'em, get 'em. Straight till you don't like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Straight till you don't like, Taste that pink venom, taste that pink venom, taste that pink venom. Get 'em, get 'em, get 'em. Straight till you don't like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Straight till you don't like,
The group's album, Born Pink, is set for release on September 16. And that is it for tonight. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
RPN, Radio Philippines Network Incorporated, DXKO. Presence sa Utso sa bayan sa inyong radyo. RPN DXKO, ang Radyo Ronda, TV sa Latayan sa Cagayan de Oro. Silahan na may galaon sa katawan, andaw mo serbisyo sa tanan. Ang RPN DXKO Radyo Ronda, sakop sa KBP, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
The term hormonal is often associated to being moody, but our hormones affect so much more than just our moods. These vital chemicals allow our bodies to function properly. They enable reproduction, movement, and so much more. When they're not functioning as they should, it affects our daily living and can lead to a number of diseases. On the program today, we'll talk about hormones and their role in our body. What happens when we have an imbalance and the best ways to maintain healthy hormone level. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome to MedTalk Health Talk only on CNN Philippines. Our bodies contain over 100 chemicals or hormones that help us function as we go about our daily routines. Now, our guests are here today to tell us more about the role of hormones in our body and how we can keep our hormone levels in check. With us is Dr. Celeste Ong Ramos. She's an endocrinologist from the St. Luke's Medical Center in Quezon City. We're also joined by Dr. Mia Fojas, who is an endocrinologist as well from Manila Med and the past president of the Philippine College of Endocrinology, Diabetes, and Metabolism. Now, to better understand how our hormones work, it helps to know how the endocrine system functions in our body. Now, Dr. Celeste, please tell us more about this, our endocrine system.
So basically, our endocrine system composed of our hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, thyroid gland, parathyroid glands, adrenal gland, ovaries, testes, and of course our pancreas. So basically, they work hand in hand, okay? So the organs have to secrete hormones, or we call it chemicals. They send signals to be conveyed to the different parts of our organ to have them proper function. So each organs will have a very specific function.
Ngayon, Doc Mia, please explain what exactly are there. Ano ba itong mga hormones na palagi natin naririnig?
The hormones function initially even sa conception, no? So, paano tayo nabuo, no? Tapos, and then in the womb of the mother, that yung growth ng fetus, andyan yung hormones. Tapos, it also govern kung magiging babae o lalaki ang baby. And merong isang trigger. Kasi usually, yung conception is female usually, and then may trigger para maging phenotypically male ang baby. So, ayan, sa growth pa lang, and then later on, nade-develop, nagkakaroon ng mga yung thyroid gland para yung child mag-grow, tapos yung growth hormone galing sa mother and then sa child. So, marami, no? Even us as adults, when we wake up, that's hormonal because meron tayo yung melatonin na tinatawag galing doon sa pineal gland natin. So, waking up and sleeping cycles also affect our stress hormones and a lot of other things like indigestion, everyday activities, definitely my hormone. It makes us survive.
Now, I'd like to ask Doc Celeste this time, because earlier you mentioned that hormones are responsible for sending signals to different parts of the body. Let's explain to our viewers what type of signals do they send and what is this in relation to, let's say, the mood a person exhibits.
So, there are different types of glands, diba? So, that different glands, that specific gland, like for example, so for our pituitary gland, so it will release yung thyroid-releasing hormones, and then that will send signal to the thyroid gland to produce the thyroid hormone. So, sometimes we know more about the hyperthyroidism, just to give you an example. So hyperthyroidism is caused by excess thyroid hormones in our body. So it will manifest with sometimes heat intolerance, mood swings, irritability, or laging mainit yung ulo nila, or it can be accompanied by palpitations, tremors, weight loss. On the contrary, if the thyroid gland is not functioning too much or not producing too much thyroid hormones, then it will cause hypothyroidism. So you will have like opposite of the hyperthyroidism. So you will have like cold intolerance, parang laging inaantok, low bat siya, so it affects the mood, no? Parang gusto lang nila, tulog lang sila, or parang ayaw nilang bumangon. So basically, yun yung common na nagiging manifestations nila with regards to the mood, no? So may mga mood swings din talaga. So when there is hormonal imbalance.
Now, Doc Mia, let's talk about some of the most vital ones para sa ating mga viewers. Let's talk about three, some of the most important ones. Let's talk about cortisol, let's talk about insulin, let's talk about the thyroid hormone.
Going first, yung siguro sa amin, mga endocrinologists, pinaka-importante ang cortisol because this governs a lot of organ systems, no? So yung cortisol, yun yung tinatawag na main steroid. Yung steroid, may sarili tayong steroid sa ating katawan. And without this, babagsak ang blood pressure natin. But also, because of cortisol, yan yung tinatawag nating stress hormones. Without cortisol, hindi tayo makaka-adequately respond sa ating stress, no? So, with increased stress, tataas dapat ang cortisol. So, yung energy system natin maglalakad agad. So, tataas ang sugar, yung blood pressure natin medyo tataas, bibilis yung tibok ng puso, para yung katawan natin mag-respond agad kung ano man yung stress na inihaharap sa atin.
Doc Mia, let's talk about the insulin and let's talk about the thyroid hormone real quick.
Without insulin, hindi makakapasok yung blood sugar natin sa ating mga tissues, sa ating muscles and fats, no? So, insulin is actually a key so that your sugar gets into your body properly for us to utilize as energy. And the thyroid hormone, ayan, yun yung nagpapabilis o nagpapabagal ng ating sistema sa katawan. So, it actually increases our heart rate, our metabolic rate kung mataas or kung kinakailangan ng thyroid hormone at saka pinapabagal niya kung medyo kailangan ng katawan na pabagalin.
Yeah, so those are just some of the more important hormones that our body has, and it's also important to keep them at normal levels because when our hormone levels are too high or too low, it can affect our daily living. We'll talk more about that when we return. We're your partner in healthcare, so keep it here on MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk. Our hormones are chemicals that allow us to carry out our daily functions. They do so by sending signals to different parts of the body. But sometimes these hormone levels can get too much or there may not be enough of that. So, Dr. Celeste, let's go through some of the causes ng pagkakaroon ng imbalance of these hormones.
So yung mga more common, no? So one, pwedeng hereditary siya. Like for example, for the thyroid conditions, minsan namamana yung, lalo na yung mga pagiging hyperthyroid, no? Common kasi yan sa mga kababaihan. And of course, pag may family history tayo. So one, pwedeng nasa genetics natin. The other one naman, of course, pwede rin siya yung dahil sa pwedeng inborn. Pag nung pinanganak sila, nagkaroon ng mga congenital developmental, no? Like for example, yung mga dwarfism. So pinanganak sila, medyo may kakulangan sila sa growth hormone na deficiency. The others naman, of course, yung mga endocrine disruptors. So when you say endocrine disruptors, nung pinagbubuntis pa lang yung mga baby, minsan yung mga mothers na exposed na sila dun sa mga chemicals like mga pesticides or yung mga plastics or yung mga laging nasa microwave. Kaya usually, isa din yun sa mga reasons kung bakit nagkakaroon ng mga endocrine abnormalities, no? And then, of course, pwede rin yung mga medications. There are still medications that can affect our hormone production, no? So, kaya madaming factors that can really cause yung mga endocrine abnormalities natin.
Now, we also mentioned that diabetes can occur when our insulin levels are interrupted. Pag-usapan naman natin yun, Doc Mia. Could you please explain this further for our viewers because diabetes is so prevalent here, dito sa Pilipinas?
Insulin is a hormone that functions like a susi. It's a key para makapasok ang sugar natin sa ating bodily tissues like the muscles and to store yung sugar as energy in fat cells, ganon. So, without the insulin, your sugar will remain out there and damage different organs like your kidneys, your eyes, of course your heart, kaya yung iba lumalaki yung puso, nagkaka-heart failure, yung iba mas madaling nagkakaroon ng stroke or high blood kasi nagiging sticky yung tinatawag na cholesterol, mas madali silang nag-a-attach doon sa ating blood vessels. Kaya mapapansin ninyo, maraming may diabetes na mataas pa yung cholesterol at madaling nagkaka-heart attack o kaya nagkaka-stroke.
By now, our viewers really know the importance of having well-regulated hormones sa ating katawan. Now, we've been talking about hormones and how it affects adults in general. Now, let's talk about a hormonal imbalance and how it affects a child because growth hormones are vital in a child as they develop. However, there may be factors that can lead to a deficiency, causing them to be stunted or short for that matter. Now, Doc Mia, tell us, what exactly are growth hormones and what are some of these factors na nakaka-apekto lalong-lalo na sa mga bata? Importante siguro sa mga parents or wannabe parents sa information na to.
Let's go. The mas basic doon na growth hormone, of course, it functions to make our children grow. Also, it has other functions sa mga adults. But since you introduced the topic on children, no, growth hormone makes your child grow up. So it's for the development of the bones and other organ system. But mainly, since we're talking about the short stature, no, growth hormone, tumataas siya sa mga bata. Yung spurts, no, lumalabas siya sa blood ng bata pag natutulog sila. So, ang growth hormone deficiency happens usually if there is a genetic problem sa bata. So, hindi yan ganun ka-common. However, merong kailangan dinedetect yan early on kasi kasama yata yan sa neonatal screening para as early as possible mabigyan ng bata ng injections ng growth hormone. Pero yung iba, na late na diagnose, nakikita na lang nila, parang hindi ganito katangkad ang asawa ko or ako when I was growing up, tapos nagme-delay yung bata. So, merong iba't ibang kaakibat na genetic problems usually pag may growth hormone deficiency and they have to consult their pediatric endocrinologist for this to be screened.
We've been talking about the roles that our hormone plays in our body, and having irregular levels can be harmful and cause a number of hormone-related illnesses. Now, Doc Celeste, let's talk about this. Some of the conditions here that are mentioned is depression, obesity, or yung pagiging overweight. Let's talk about depression and obesity. How can hormonal changes, hormonal imbalances cause depression?
So actually, there are different reasons kung bakit nagkakaroon ng depression, no? So one, pwede siyang, it can be part of being hypothyroid ng patient. So kasi hypothyroidism can cause depression, it can also cause weight gain. So pwede rin siya maka-added factor for the obesity. The other endocrine disorder that can cause both depression and obesity would be, of course, kung meron tayong tatawag naming Cushing syndrome, which is excess yung cortisol production in the body. So either may problema siya sa adrenal gland or sa pituitary that causes the excess cortisol, it can cause weight gain and it also causes depression. And then, of course, indirectly, once you have, sometimes when you have patients na uncontrolled yung diabetes nila, usually sila yung mga obese, no? Sometimes meron na rin sila, nagkakaroon na rin sila ng mga mental health issues like depression, no? So, kaya madaming endocrine cause that can manifest both with obesity and depression.
A lot of people might be watching this and say, I'm overweight. I've been trying to lose weight, but hindi nangyayari. I might have a hormonal problem. How common is this, Dr. Celeste? Talk about this a little bit more for our viewers.
Yeah. So usually we have a referral, no? So kasi tagal na lang nag-try mag-weight loss and then nagtatry na rin sila ng different diet strategies, especially yung mga nag-try na ng different exercise regimen and then to find it out lang pala na meron pala silang hormonal problem. It's not that common kasi siguro in reality, in my practice, baka 1 to 2 lang yung nakikita ko nagpapa-check up because of weight, no? But more for those patients, no? So we have to screen them. So we screen them for TSH, so we check for their thyroid hormones, we check for their cortisol as well. So that is a part of the guideline for managing obese patients, no?
Okay.
Especially kung sasabi nila nagda-diet naman sila and yet they don't get their weight loss target.
Fortunately, though, there are ways to manage our hormones. When we return, we'll talk about treatments or management styles that you can do if you're having problems with your hormones, and tips to maintain your endocrine system being normal and healthy. Because your health is our mission here on MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk. Our hormones help us do it all. Reproduction, movement, stress management, and much, much more. Now, their levels are affected when we go through bodily changes like puberty, menopause, and even pregnancy. But sometimes lifestyle factors and illnesses can keep them either too high or too low. Doc Mia, let's talk about that. First, let's talk about how a hormone problem is properly diagnosed.
There's either a hypersecretion or undersecretion. So, ang maganda kasi sa ating endocrine system, meron siyang tinatawag na feedback mechanism. So, normally, pag ang feedback ay normal, so, kailangan pag may oversecretion, magsisignal, let's say, sa brain na, ay, ang dami ko nang sinesecrete. Sasabihin ng brain, okay, bawasan natin ang secretion mo. So, kasi yung central gland talaga for governing the release of these hormones would be coming from the brain. That's what you call the pituitary. Now, how do we diagnose hyper or under secretion? It is actually based on yung feedback mechanism. Halimbawa, kung sa tingin namin mataas ang cortisol ng isang pasyente o mukha siyang tinatawag na Cushing's, no? Cushing's disease o kaya Cushing syndrome, una check namin kung gaano kataas yung cortisol niya. Ngayon, kung minsan hindi namin agad na-detect doon dahil may ibang tumor pala na nagkakos, check namin yung hormone na nagpaparelease ng cortisol. So, medyo may kamahalan ang pagpapa-work up nitong mga hormones na to because these are actually special tests that hindi yan na-detect agad sa ordinary annual physical examination. The endocrinologist has to be astute enough to recognize which hormones to work up.
Reminder to our viewers, if you think you have a problem with your hormones, it's best to go to a doctor who is very well trained and adept with your endocrine system. Now, Dr. Celeste, pag-usapan naman natin kung ano ang treatment usually kapag isang tao ay na-diagnose with a hormonal problem. Usually here on the show, we talk about medical management, gamot, iniinom, or surgical management. Are both types treatment option for those with hormonal problems? Pag-usapan muna natin yung gamot, which is more common pala among the two.
So usually we do surgery for those cases na sa pituitary gland, like for example, may tumor sila doon, yung tatawag namin adenoma, and we found out that they are producing too much hormones, then we offer surgery. Ganun din ang ginagawa natin for like for example sa adrenal gland, pag meron tayo doon nodule or mass na sa adrenal gland natin that produces excess adrenal hormones that causes excess BP elevation, no? Yung talagang nag-shoot up yung blood pressure, then we offer definitive treatment or definitive will be the surgical treatment, tanggalin yung adrenal gland na yun or adrenal adenoma para hindi na siya mag-produce ng excess hormones. But then again, pag hindi sila amenable, we try to give medical treatment. Okay? Kaya lang po yung sagot depende siya sa specific condition.
Doc Mia, pag-usapan natin yun. Can you give us some tips or on how to achieve this? For those who are watching, how can I maintain my endocrine system just like any other system in my body? How can I keep it healthy?
Magkaiba yung babae sa lalaki. But in general, you have to be careful of the supplements that you are taking because a lot of these, let's say, supplements, vitamins, will definitely affect your hormones. So, hindi tama na lahat idadaan sa ating multivitamins. So, kung ano lang ang kulang, yan ang ipoprovide natin to maintain your healthy hormone. Keep yourselves healthy para hindi po agad na magkaroon tayo ng complications related to pagbagsak ng mga hormones na to.
So that was very important tips. Doc Mia, thank you so much for that. Now there's so much more to know about our hormones. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. But if you have any more questions, please have a friendly chat with your doctor. Talk to your endocrinologist and find out if you really do have a problem with your hormones. With that, thank you very much, Dr. Celeste Ong Ramos and Dr. Mia Fojas, for being with us today, sharing your information, your valuable information with our viewers. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and thank you for watching Med Talk Health Talk. We'll see you again next time.
RPN, Radio Philippines Network Incorporated, DXPO. Proseso din ng utso sa bayan sa inyong radyo. RPN DXKO, ang radyo banda, TV sa Latalan sa Cagayan de Oro.